Good evening, live from Jerusalem, I'm Yalda Hakim. We've been concentrating on one smouldering conflict in the Middle East this week, but tonight we'll focus on the war that has been fought for 621 days, the war in Gaza. We'll do that not through the reporting of our own journalists who are still barred from operating independently there, but through the eyes of two British doctors. They travelled to the region to save lives and ended up showing the world the horrors of war. Tonight, I urge you not to look away. You'll see firsthand how hospitals have become front targets. You'll see young patients with their limbs blown off, tiny children with life-threatening burns, some completely alone, many with few surviving relatives. Throughout, Dr. Victoria Rose and Dr. Tom Potokar support their colleagues and try to keep their patients alive, patching them up only for them to be bombed again. And in the fog of war, with disputed versions of what's happening on the battlefield, these two doctors find another calling: to bear witness, to broadcast the images that our news cameras have not been allowed to capture. Later in the hour, I'll speak live to Dr. Victoria Rose and a young Palestinian journalist who recently left the Strip. But first, here's our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, with a special report from the doctors on the front line.
Gaza is a sliver of land where hospitals have become frontline targets.
Absolutely massive strike on EGH Hospital.
And operating theatres are on the battlefield.
Everyone is a target, everyone is fair game. Doctors, children.
In this film, two British surgeons recorded their first-hand experiences over a 3-week period.
The emaciated bodies lying on the operating table.
Dr. Tom Potokar, a burns and reconstructive specialist.
This was so barbaric.
And Dr. Victoria Rose, a plastic surgeon, are both driven by one motive:
this is the little 10-year-old boy whose ankle got blown off.
Saving lives. What they witnessed demands to be shown.
And she's had a liver injury, so shrapnel here.
It's the total inhumanity and the cruelty.
It's absolute carnage here. This guy's been brought in for malnutrition.
The sound of rockets and shelling. This is the daily life in Gaza.
Tom Potokar is a war zone veteran. He's the former chief surgeon of the International Red Cross and seen the worst in the world's bloodiest conflict areas. He's been travelling to Gaza for the past 7 years. But this visit's about to turn into one unmatched before in intensity and violence. Within days of arriving, 2 of Gaza's main hospitals are hit, including the European where he's working. The Israeli forces will later confirm they dropped 50 bombs in this operation. The Israeli attacks are unleashed without warning. The strikes are against 2 of the last functioning hospitals in Gaza. A security camera in front of the emergency entrance of the European hospital shows the moments before. Note the man in the checked shirt on the left. Top right, you can see the first of the bombs dropping. Before anyone can escape, a barrage of others follow. The Israeli forces will justify this by saying they're targeting Hamas tunnels beneath. Hospitals have protected status in war, and attacking them is a war crime. You can see the man in the checked shirt emerging from all the dust and debris. And Dr. Tom Potokar is on the scene within minutes and begins documenting what he sees.
Absolutely massive strike on EGH Hospital. This is right in front of the emergency room. People are on the ground. Shrapnel everywhere. Devastation right in the forecourt of the hospital. Absolutely terrible. This is the corridor going down to main theatres. I've got a prime artist just the rest of you. Absolute mayhem. It's a direct hit on the hospital. Corridor absolutely full of smoke. It's going up towards the accident emergency unit.
His footage clearly shows a huge number of patients and staff in the hospital.
And chaos at the moment.
The IDF drops multiple bombs on the European hospital that day, with at least 12 craters visible around the area. When Dr. Tom and team first arrive in Gaza at the start of May, these are the only major hospitals still in operation. By the time they all leave at the end of the month, almost a third will have been taken out of action. There ends up being more than 30 attacks on medical facilities while the doctors are there, as well as on at least 5 hospitals. Those put out of action include Al Auda, which has been operating as the main medical facility in the north at this point. And there's the bulldozing of the only dialysis clinic, again in the north. With the European out of action, Nasser is now the most functional hospital left for the whole population. Dr. Victoria Rose and her colleagues arrive in Gaza on the day this is all unfolding.
We've just got to Gaza. We've entered through a different entry point today.
They're meant to go to the European hospital, but hearing of the bombing there, instead head to Nasser to wait for the casualties. The London-based NHS surgeon is on her 3rd visit to Gaza. She's already realising her duties are twofold, saving lives, but also bearing witness. Foreign journalists are barred from entering. Many of those inside are being killed. She knows international doctors can be the voice of Gazans, and she's determined to do that. Before dawn same morning, Nasser's also been hit. The strike kills an injured journalist, who Israeli forces say is a Hamas operative involved in October 7 attacks, which he always denied. The hospital bombings follow a pattern of attacks on Gaza's health services, those working in them and reporting about them.
These attacks terrorize the people, as well as the staff who work here, who tell us that they are terrified that if they continue to keep coming to work, they will be next.
The newly injured from the European hospital bombings start arriving at Nasser, where Dr. Victoria and her team are. It's already heavily overstretched, but now more important than ever. The grief here never stops.
And his tibias, which are the shin bones, and he's lost a huge amount of skin.
Dr. Victoria finds her operations list immediately full of mainly young patients, many now on their own or with few surviving relatives.
And she's had a liver injury, so shrapnel here into the liver. This is Yakub, who had a blast injury. I think we spoke about him before. So a bomb went off and it's basically blown his right ankle off.
She begins a daily video blog and shares her experiences, her patients and their injuries with us and on social media.
This is from an explosion burn.
Yeah.
I think I've felt at times that this was so barbaric, what was going on, in terms of the numbers of children coming through the doors with bits of their bodies blown off, that it just had to be displayed. I felt a real duty to show what I've seen and say, look, I'm seeing what they've told you they're seeing. If this is actually really happening, you've got to look at this now.
Back at the European, Dr. Tom is witnessing the frantic moving out of all patients that they can. Weeks later, the Israelis will say they found the body of the latest Hamas leader beneath the hospital, but his name is not among the 30-plus killed at this stage. The attack embodies the disputing versions of what's happening in Gaza. Israelis will again claim this proves Hamas hides behind civilians, whilst the Palestinians say it demonstrates the military's disregard for civilian safety. Right now, though, Dr. Tom sees it as a fight for survival and saving lives.
We're standing outside the operating theatre. You can see the damage behind me. It's not even possible to take any cases to theatre. It is too dangerous. The theatres have been damaged and the staff, unsurprisingly, have left at the moment to try and seek some safety.
The next day, it's evident the damage is wide and extensive. But Dr. Tom and his Palestinian colleagues are still holding out hope of getting the hospital back up and running. And they're doing what they can to shift the rubble.
Busy clearing up the mess from last night's attack. Outside theatre, here you can see the maintenance team are trying to get things back in order so we can start operating again.
There are still patients in ICU, and then there are fresh attacks.
This is where the strike was. You can see the digger underneath. They were trying to clear the rubble. That's been hit.
Israel's fresh military offensive is in full attack mode by now. It's called Operation Gideon's Chariots. And the IDF says in just 1 week, they've hit nearly 700 Hamas targets across Gaza. Most of the European hospital patients have been stretchered out by now. But a few medics opt to stay until all can be taken to safety.
The rest of the hospital is now evacuated and, to all intents and purposes, abandoned for the moment. So this is the last remaining area of clinical activity, and the emergency medical teams are coming to take the patients away. There's still another 5 to go, so we're hoping that they'll be able to find places and come and pick these patients up before too long.
And we intend to remain here until the last patient left the unit. We hope for the best for all of us who are in this difficult time at the European hospital in Gaza.
If you really want to see the real heroes of humanity, these guys here. These are the paramedics, the ambulance drivers, the doctors and nurses who've stayed behind to look after these few patients, understanding the risks that they're taking, that they still do their job with dignity, with respect, with humility. These are true humanitarian human beings. We've just left the European Gaza Hospital. Milena and myself are now on our way back to the guest house. We had to see what we could do and where we'll go after this, but very grateful to Norway and the UN for coming to get us out.
Unfortunately, the hospital where we were deployed is off the border. There is no electricity and no water. It will be probably repaired within 2 weeks. We are looking for another appropriate place to continue our mission.
The complete Israeli blockade on aid is biting hard. Hunger is hitting the youngest most harshly. The impact of this siege is keenly felt at Nasser Hospital, where Dr. Tom and Dr. Victoria and their teams are both now working.
They just brought me to the paediatric centre to have a look at some of the children. This guy's been brought in for malnutrition. So is this little guy. Really shocking. So that's what she used to look like?
Mariam needs special formula held up by the blockade.
So from that, now to this.
The little girl's deterioration is painful and slow. But there's very little anyone can do. She dies waiting for the aid which never comes. And there are so many others still wanting, still suffering. Even a search for food can be deadly.
There's the sound of rockets and shelling been going on all day. Terrible news coming out from the north of the country. Our driver today was on the phone to his son-in-law in Gaza City, pleading with him not to go out as it was too dangerous, but he was starving. He went out looking for food. He was killed. This is the daily life in Gaza.
Quite a productive day here, probably because we've got Tom back.
They're doing at least 10 surgeries a day, and the bulk are children.
This is the little 10-year-old boy whose ankle got blown off. Graham shortened the bone, and Tiz and I have just put this piece of skin that we've taken from his thigh onto it to cover the hole. So hopefully job done, sorted. This is the third little guy that I've done today. He's got a blast injury to his legs. So the right one we've had to shorten because he's lost some bone, and the left one he's got a huge hole in. So he's number 3. The little guy behind him, he's a 35-40% burn. He was number 2, and my first little girl, she was under a year old, and she had a burn to her hand. Alex was not very happy.
And those they do patch up face incredible challenges.
Obviously, I see malnutrition differently in the trauma patients because it comes across in terms of poor healing, not having the essential nutrients and vitamins that you need means that cell turnover is not as good as it should be, and your capacity to heal wounds is pretty poor.
2 weeks into their trip, and we sense the doctor's frustration is turning to anger.
It's the screams of children when they're waking up from an anaesthetic, for example. It's the sight of a child coming, or one we've got to go and operate on shortly and have been operating on every day for the last few days, who is 7 years old and is limbless from the top of the thighs on both sides. And she's 7 years old, and that you never get used to. And it is just, it's the total inhumanity and the cruelty of it.
I just have to show you this little guy. This is my favourite little guy. He has a 35% burn, and it's a massive burn for a little guy like this. He's so adorable. His eyelids are burnt, his hands are burnt, even his feet are burnt. This is just really completely unnecessary.
The toddler is Hatem, and his family photo album shows him as a happy, healthy boy before the bombing. His father was a teacher, but was killed alongside his pregnant mother. Now Hatem is the family's sole survivor. His life is hanging on a thread, and Dr. Victoria is monitoring every step.
Unfortunately, he hasn't been too well recently. He's developed some bleeding from his intestines, which we've noticed in his stools. And this isn't uncommon from a big burn. It's a stress ulcer, but it's not something that we normally see in somebody of his age. We're trying to support him as much as we can. He's had quite a lot of blood transfusion, and he's got a tube in his nose now to try and get some nutrients and vitamins in him. But unfortunately, we've had to delay his surgery until he's a little bit fitter. So we're keeping everything crossed. He's holding his own at the moment.
His guardian now, and the man who's hardly left his hospital bed, is his grandfather, who's working with a British charity to get Hatem airlifted to safety. But despite constant appeals, so far no visas have been granted. In more than 20 months, the UK's taken fewer than a handful of the injured from Gaza, just 2 children.
What did children do wrong to suffer such injuries, to be burned and bombed? We ask God to grant them healing.
Evening bombing.
Their video blogs are showing the attacks becoming more intense. And constant Israeli drones are scouting for the next target, delivering another level of terror. They call it the Gaza lullaby, the constant sounds of anarchy and terror. Dr. Victoria and her colleague Dr. Graham Groom fall into a pattern of nightly updates. And humour helps them cope.
This is an unusual raise and groom.
We're actually being bombed on the balcony.
In calls from Gaza, the teams tell us what's happening on the ground.
Where everyone is a target, everyone is fair game. It is the entire population that's being hit, be that doctors, children, teachers. It is just indiscriminate who's going. But I think the actual destruction of the structures is very, it seems to be very planned or calculated, the way in which the hospitals are being rendered functionless.
They know right now they're the Palestinians' best hope as witnesses.
If there's nothing to hide, well, why aren't international journalists allowed in? If there's nothing to hide, why have so many Palestinian journalists been slaughtered? You know, people should perhaps be asking that question.
It's been non-stop.
I've seen about 12 to 15 patients on the ward.
The doctors' video blogs are gaining a lot of traction on social media platforms.
We need the aid.
And they're creating a lot of noise.
Tell me about the situation where you are.
Well, Dr. Rose joins me now from Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis.
Dr. Potokar, thank you so much for joining us.
Die britische Chirurgin Victoria Rose operiert in einem Krankenhaus in Khan Yunis.
It's the worst I've ever seen it in Gaza.
What do you want people to hear from you?
Frankly, I want to stop having to give these interviews. It really has reached the point of utter inhumanity.
The bombing of hospitals and medics goes on, even as Israel seems to bow to US pressure and says it will allow some aid in. But this attack on a doctor's family home really rocks the teams working at Nasser Hospital. The bundles being carried out are the charred remains of 9 of the doctor's children. Their parents are both medics, both based at Nasser. Their mother, Dr. Allah, only escapes because she was at the hospital working. Their father's critically wounded. Just one child, Adam, survives, but may need his arm amputated, and he's taken to intensive care. He'll need much surgery ahead. He's in ICU with his father, but his father never recovers. Being a health worker in Gaza is one of the most dangerous jobs in the world right now, and all here know it.
It's quite late. I think it's nearly midnight now, and it's been another really busy day of operating.
Yes, it has. And also a sad day. The last patient on my list today was an 11-year-old boy who seemed much younger as we lifted him onto the operating table. His injuries were bad enough, but the background, I think, was worse. In an attack that may have or not have been aimed at his father was very badly injured, but 9 of his brothers and sisters were killed.
Childhoods are snuffed out in an instant. A little girl picks her way out through the fire of an Israeli airstrike, alone. More than half of those killed here turn out to be children. The toddler is called Hanin. Her courage has saved her life. But she is suffering and now an orphan. Her uncle is all that remains of her family.
We appeal to the world, to anyone with a conscience. How much longer will you remain silent? Imagine this was your daughter, your sister. This is injustice. Where is the world? What have we done to deserve this?
18 children formed the bulk of the dead in this single attack. Later, we find out the journalist who filmed the fire is himself killed in an Israeli strike, as well as one of the civil defense workers taking part in the rescue. The attacks, with the high child casualties, leaves the travelling doctors increasingly emotional as the end of their trip looms.
We can no longer just stand here and tell you what is happening on the ground. The emaciated bodies lying on the operating table, huge chunks of flesh missing. I want to talk to you about the political class that are complicit in this ongoing slaughter and starvation. They appear on the news shows, give interviews and try to justify what is happening. They have no idea how dangerous their words are. They have never been here. They have never seen with their own eyes what is going on. Heard the screams, smelt the rotting flesh, shuddered from the constant bombardment.
A controversial new Israeli aid distribution system leads to chaos. There's mass panic and multiple claims over multiple days that the Israeli forces are shooting at hungry Palestinians. The doctors deal with the aftermath.
Well, these are all gunshot wounds, and as you can see behind me, we've got all the bays are full, and they're all gunshot wounds. It's absolute carnage here, and there are even more people in the main emergency department. If you come through.
This huge emergency coincides with the doctor's departure.
We are in a very short period of time where we could make a difference here and stop the war. And if we don't, I don't think there will be anything to come back to.
To be honest, I'm angry. I'm angry at what is happening here and the fact that it's still happening and the fact that still the reaction is negligible in terms of action.
They make their way through the rubble that was once Gaza with a UN escort and hear of more hospitals being hit, more casualties for their colleagues left behind to cope with.
This is possibly my last message from Gaza, which is very sad, really, because I'm a bit worried about everybody that we've left that needs further plastic surgery.
Within days of their leaving, there'll be more Israeli attacks against ambulance crews, medics and hospitals. The Israeli bombardment during the doctor's visit has altered an already changed Gaza, almost certainly forever. It's probably changed the travelling doctors too, who tried their hardest to save lives, but also highlight what's been happening.
The eyewitness accounts of Dr. Tom Potokar and Dr. Victoria Rose. And Dr. Rose joins me live tonight alongside the Palestinian journalist Rita Baroud and UNICEF spokesperson James Elder, who's just returned from Gaza as well. But before I speak to them, I just want to show you these faces. At least 41 health workers, nurses, pharmacists, doctors, admin staff, medical students have been killed in Gaza in the past month alone. That's according to Healthcare Workers Watch, an independent charity that collates and verifies the deaths. The World Health Organization says more than 900 people have been killed in healthcare facilities since the war began. Let's bring in Dr. Victoria Rose first. And Dr. Rose, that was an incredibly difficult watch. And I imagine for you and your colleagues, your Palestinian colleagues on the ground, every day was difficult and tough. And we got that sense watching the aspects of your life there that you filmed. But you talked about how difficult it was going to be leaving. Do you have an update, especially on some of the children that remain in those hospitals?
Yeah, we do have an update, and the main thing that's happened since we left is that NASA has gone into the red zone. So it's actually now in an evacuation zone. Although the hospital hasn't been ordered to evacuate, the staff have to deconflict their journeys. So that means that they have to coordinate with the IDF to come in and out of the hospital. And that's had a real knock-on effect in the way that the hospital functions.
And for the patients that are within that hospital now that it is in the red zone?
So a lot evacuated themselves, all of the walking wounded that could leave left. But the real issue is that there are 48 patients in the intensive care unit, and none of the hospitals around NASA have the capability to manage intensive care patients. It's of MSF Belgium, of ICRC, the Kuwait and the Jordanian cannot take ICU patients, and none of those field hospitals can generate oxygen. NASA is the only hospital in the south of Gaza that has an oxygen station. It's also the only hospital that has a CT scanner and the only hospital that has a blood bank. So if NASA does go out of operation, which is very likely now that it's in eye.
Dr. Rose, you warned before you left that one of the things that worried you is that if things get worse than what they are, and it seems like it has now that it's in the red zone, that there wouldn't be much to go back to. Is that the sense you still have?
I think for us, it's very difficult for medical healthcare personnel to go back and not have a hospital to work in. There is very limited amounts of aid we can offer from a field hospital. The field hospitals are not designed to give trauma care. They're designed as triage centres. So if there are no left standing hospitals in Gaza, we are very limited in what we can offer the population.
And Dr. Rose, is there anything that you would urge the British government to do at this point? We saw there in the piece, the fact that they've just been so few people, so few children that have been evacuated out of the country and out of the territory, and that is one of the issues.
Well, there is a lot we can do. I think the evacuation of children is possibly the most important, particularly now that COGAT seems to be allowing more children to leave. And definitely the UK, which has only taken 2 children, does need to step up and accept more, like the rest of its European compadres. The other thing that we can do is continually put pressure on Israel. This is a human rights issue, and they cannot take out the last standing hospital in Gaza. There's a lot of work being done by our Jewish colleagues in Israel now to try and lobby the government to get the IDF to move away from this area. And I think anything that we can do to support that would mean that the healthcare system in Gaza will not completely collapse.
Dr. Victoria Rose, we're grateful that you've joined us here this evening and for also documenting all of those scenes in Gaza. The work that you and your Palestinian colleagues have been doing on the ground is truly heroic, especially when journalists can't get in and bear witness. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, You heard Dr. Rose there speaking about the responsibility she felt to tell the world what she was seeing. Others in Gaza have heeded that same calling, including 22-year-old Rita Baroud. She wanted to be a poet. After October the 7th, she became a journalist.
2 years ago, I was just a university student studying languages. I was hanging out with my friends, living life with my family. One day, I woke up to the sound of bombs, to the destruction of my home, to the deaths of my friends. I was no longer a student, I became a journalist, not because I chose to, but because I had to. Because Gaza was sealed off from the world.
And Gaza is still largely sealed off to the world. Rita was speaking there at the Paris Peace Forum after leaving her home behind 8 weeks ago. And she joins me tonight from Marseille. Thank you very much, Rita, for joining us here on the programme. You're talking there in Paris about becoming almost an accidental journalist after October 7 and the war that began on the people of Gaza. Just tell me about that.
So, when the 7th of October began, I was a normal girl and I was only 20. So, you know that the Israelis didn't allow for any of international journalists to enter Gaza, especially after the war of 2021. So, when I saw that we are the civilians people now, the only ears, the only voice for our people in Gaza, I choose to become a journalist, to talk about the right, to talk about what's going on in Gaza, because I felt like it's more than a duty, it's more than a responsibility for me, for my people, to talk about like what's going on in Gaza, because this is so important. There is no international journalist, there is no European outlets that talks enough about Gaza. So I choose to become a journalist because this is also something important, and it's about a human that becoming a journalist, not because I want to, but because I had to.
And tell me how difficult it was then to leave Gaza.
Well, leaving Gaza wasn't that easy because we left Gaza before 2 months. And now I am in France and I feel like, okay, I am in a new situation and the genocide is still in Gaza. And, you know, I always say, like, this is not a survive, this is a second or another way of death. So here I am in France with all of stress, with all of hopeless and helpless. So, yeah, I feel like I am dying in a slowly way. But all I have to do now is just writing about what's going on in Gaza, because it's so important for me to do something also for 2 million people that they are suffering in Gaza and they are trying to survive.
And Rita, what are some of your friends and people who remain in Gaza saying about the situation now?
Well, talking to my people and to my friends in Gaza, it makes me feel like I am dying while I am talking to them, because, you know, there is no food, there is nothing left in Gaza but rubble, but death. But like when I'm talking to them, I feel like I am so helpless and I need to do something for them. But, you know, the situation is getting worse and worse day by day. And it's not just about food. Like how Dr. Victoria also mentioned that the hospitals and the health system in Gaza is so damaged. So we are talking about a real genocide that going on in Gaza with Like, I sometimes I feel like I want to explain more and more, but I don't know how to explain.
Yeah, it's difficult, but we're really grateful that you have joined us here on the programme to share your thoughts. Rita, thank you.
You're so welcome.
Well, after an 11-week blockade on food and medical supplies, the Israeli military finally began to allow aid in last month, but most of it was being distributed on Israel's terms from specially built hubs guarded by the IDF as thousands of people converged on the 3 locations this happened. Have a look.
Civilians are risking, and in several instances, losing their lives just trying to get food.
We will investigate each and one of those incidents and each and one of those allegations.
Many deaths, and it just doesn't have to be this way.
Well, since the aid distribution sites opened nearly 4 weeks ago, an estimated 300 people have been killed and thousands more injured in separate incidents. In many cases, the IDF has said soldiers opened fire when they felt under threat. Well, James Elder from UNICEF was in Gaza for some of that time and joins me tonight from Amman. Thank you very much, James, for joining us here on the programme. Just give me your assessment. We obviously just saw what Dr. Rose and her colleagues were able to put together. We produced that documentary, but you've just recently come out and, of course, you've seen the aid situation on the ground. Just give us your assessment.
Yeah, from a horrifying low base, somehow Gaza has got much worse, much more perilous for a couple of main reasons, Yalda. One is we now have a water crisis, call it a water famine, at a point where if fuel in Gaza is what pumps treatment plants, it's what pumps desalination, it gets trucks across. 100-day blockade. There's been a 100-day blockade, Yalda, of any fuel coming into the Gaza Strip. If that continues, we start seeing children die of thirst. At the same time, if you can add to that, more than 100 children have been coming in with malnutrition every day in 2025. The bombardment continues. As Dr. Rose pointed out very well, the hospitals are pretty much under siege. I went to Nasser. I saw children leaving Nasser without the oxygen they needed. They will die in their tents. So somehow, with a bombardment and now with a water crisis, man-made, this is not logistical. This is a politics of denial, and denial is lethal in Gaza. So yes, this is somehow the most perilous time for children, for families in Gaza.
And James, the other issue, of course, is the Gaza the humanitarian foundation, this new aid distribution system that Israel and the United States has put together, which has been heavily criticised for basically not functioning within the laws of international law, and the fact that we're seeing every day dozens of people killed just trying to get food.
Yeah, it's horrific. Somehow a bad situation's been made a lot worse. And the thing is, there is a system in place, and it was a system you don't have to look. You could look back 30 years, Yalda, because humanitarianism has been doing this in scores of countries since World War II. We just have to go back 2 months. A ceasefire, 500, 600 trucks, 400 a day, 400 distribution points. Humanitarian aid is about going to where people need it. That's why we had 400 distribution points. UNICEF was even going door to door on malnutrition. So it's about making sure everyone can reach it. This is a handful of spots. And they're militarised. You're asking people, you're forcing people, because of denial of humanitarian aid elsewhere, to go to a combat site, and then excusing the killing of them because it's a combat site. This is it is ludicrous, but it's lethal. Now, in Nasser Hospital recently, I met one of these little boys. Try and picture this, a 13-year-old little boy. His dad gave him money to buy bread. Family is starving, understand, everyone wants to look to famine. Famine's a technical term. When famine occurs, it's too late. Mass death, Yalda, as you know. Starvation's already happening. It's when a child's body starts to collapse. The immune system starts to fail it. This boy's family was starving. They gave him money to buy bread. He saw a flood of people going to one of these sites, so he went. Next thing, as we've seen time and time again, there's shooting, there's quadcopters, a tank shell is fired. When I met him, Abdul al-Rahman, he had shrapnel in his stomach and his spleen. Somehow this little guy, because his family wanted a video because they wanted medical evacuation, like Dr. Rose pointed to, wanted his story told. He sat up through this immense pain. The painkillers are not there. The day I left, he succumbed to those injuries because of that lack of medical care, and because countries, despite their outrage and what's happening, don't open their doors or their hearts to children like him. So he died. He's a little boy who went to get food for a starving family. That's what we are seeing, not one-off, time and time again at these sites.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so grateful that you've joined us and shared this story with our audience. As you say, it's just one of many. James, thank you so much. Well, three different accounts from a doctor, a journalist and an aid worker. We wanted to speak to a representative from the Israeli government tonight, but no one was available. The IDF did not respond to our request for an interview. I did speak to a man who until last June was a member of Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet and now leads an opposition party. I asked former Defence Minister Benny Gantz whether Israel was deliberately targeting hospitals and healthcare facilities. Just have a listen to his response.
Yalda, this is absolutely not true. And please, let me take a minute to explain you. Back in 2014, I was I was attacked because I had to attack a hospital that anti-tank weapons were shooting from, and I had to wait to make sure that it's being evacuated from all its people and all its personnel before we hit it. And we did it in 2014. When we went back to Shifa Hospital and we raided this hospital, we did everything in our capacity to make sure that no one is getting hurt. We even put more equipment into it to support the patients that were there. And by the way, those hospitals are a coverage, or actually they are being used by Hamas to put all their tunnels and all their operational infrastructure underneath those hospitals, underneath those mosques, underneath those schools. So what we are doing is we are alerting them. We are making sure that they are being evacuated, and then we do what we do. We don't go deliberately and directly and hit an hospital just because it's an hospital. No way we're doing it.
Well, I understand what you're trying to say, but Ehud Olmert has said that Israel is committing war crimes. Martin Griffiths, the former UN humanitarian chief, has described the situation in Gaza to us on Sky News, to me, as genocide. We're seeing an outcry and criticism from the international community. If you're saying you're not deliberately targeting civilians, and every day we're seeing dozens of civilians killed when they try and go to food depots for food, if you're saying that is not happening, why not allow international journalists into the Strip to be able to assess this situation themselves?
First, I think there is a huge coverage of media inside Gaza this way or another. So I don't think that's the main issue. I want to emphasize that we are not doing what we are being accused to do. This is not true. And the fact that some Israelis said something, that doesn't make it true to begin with. Yalda, look at me. I approved workers from Gaza to come to Israel. I allowed Israelis to stand up every morning in the Gaza gates to take patients from Gaza to Israeli hospitals to be treated. Palestinian kids that were taken to Israeli hospitals, brought back at the very same day, and the woman who did it, among others, was murdered on October 7. We did everything in our capacity from 2007 on to balance between humanitarian needs, economical needs, operational needs, yet Hamas decided to do what it wanted to do.
That was former Defence Minister Benny Gantz speaking to me earlier. Well, in attacking Gaza, Israel is trying to wipe out Hamas, but at the same time, they are now targeting the so-called puppet master, Iran. The White House confirmed tonight that Donald Trump will make a decision about US military action in Iran within 2 weeks. Well, while he considers his options, the tit-for-tat missile strikes between Iran and Israel go on. The Israeli military has focused on multiple military, nuclear and civilian sites across Iran and says it attacked the Iraq nuclear reactor, which is still under construction. Iran's targets have included Israel's educational and energy facilities and government buildings. The Soroka hospital in the southern city of Beersheba was hit today, leaving 2 people seriously injured and around 40 others wounded. Sky's Cordelia Lynch sent us this report from the city.
A strike on the largest hospital in southern Israel. An attack in the heart of a city. Inside, chaos and panic. Look what's happened to my hospital, the man cries. Outside, bewildered patients. This woman, still in shock. She's 7 months pregnant. Her legs trembling. Iran says it hit a military site nearby, and Soroka Medical Center was not a direct target. There were only minor injuries, but the impact on this war could be great.
Suddenly, we heard an enormous explosion. We knew it was close. All sorts of things fell from the roof. The doctor was injured and others in the room were hit by debris too. The building opposite was on fire. It was very dangerous, very worrying and very scary.
The siren stopped and then we heard a huge explosion. We were thrown backwards from the blast.
Well, you can see that the roof has collapsed on one of the buildings and there are lots of windows blown out. The Israelis are framing this as a war crime of the most serious kind that demands a heavy response. The question is whether this strike represents a turning point in the conflict.
3 days ago, Farabi Hospital in Kermanshah in Iran was also damaged. But Israel claimed it wasn't a target. Now, it seems focused on retribution. Its leader promising victory.
They're targeting civilians because they're a criminal regime. They're the arch-terrorists of the world. They want to have nuclear terrorism, which will put the entire world under nuclear blackmail, and they would use these weapons. That's what the Ayatollah Khamenei says that he would do. He would use these weapons to wipe Israel off the map. Well, he's not going to. We're not going to let him. And we're in the process of achieving a tremendous victory.
The drumbeat of war is sounding louder. Far-right politician Itamar Ben-Gvir among the emboldened, calling for the Iranian regime to be annihilated and praising Donald Trump.
What do you want Donald Trump to do? What do you want him to do?
In Iran, the civilian death toll is far higher. Human rights groups estimate 600 people have died. But the human cost here is a harder story to tell. Images of this funeral among the few to emerge as the country faces an internet blackout. This is the latest attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, a heavy water reactor, one Israel claimed could be used for plutonium production in the future. The last 24 hours have felt like a warning shot. Dynamics fragile, the sands shifting, and everything looking a lot more precarious. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Beersheba in southern Israel.
So could Donald Trump be buying himself some more time? Well, earlier in the White House, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the US president believes there's a substantial chance of negotiations with Iran in the near future. Have a listen.
I have a message directly from the president, and I quote, "Based on the fact that there's a substantial chance of negotiations that may or may not take place with Iran in the near future, I will make my decision whether or not to go within the next 2 weeks." That's a quote directly from the president for all of you today.
Press Secretary Caroline Levitt there. Well, last night we brought you the view from Russia on a possible war in the Middle East. In the past few hours, our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett has been speaking to Vladimir Putin's spokesperson. Dmitry Peskov warned that assassinating Iran's supreme leader would open Pandora's box. Just have a listen.
It should be unacceptable. Even talking about that should be unacceptable for everyone.
But it is being talked about.
Unfortunately.
Donald Trump has been openly speculating about it. What do you make of that language? Is it irresponsible, inflammatory?
Well, he never said about a definite decision on that.
But he's speculating about killing Iran's supreme leader.
We would rather not do that by ourselves.
If it were to happen, though, that Israel assassinated Ayatollah Ali Khamenei with US assistance, how would Russia react?
Very negatively. Very negatively. We will strongly disapprove it.
Would it prompt any action?
Well, actually, it will lead to an action coming from inside Iran. Iran's society is very well organized and very well consolidated, and it will lead to birth of extremist moods inside Iran. And those who are speaking about that, they should keep it in mind. They will open the Pandora box.
That was Vladimir Putin's spokesperson speaking to our Moscow correspondent, Ivor Bennett. Well, Israel is at war on multiple fronts, but now we know there's a chance for diplomacy. 2 weeks while Donald Trump makes a decision. We'll continue to bring you all the developments from the region and see how things unfold over the course of the next 2 weeks. And of course, no doubt that Iran will continue to launch its ballistic missiles on Israel, and Israel will continue to launch multiple strikes on different targets that will have an impact on civilians on both sides. As I said, we'll continue to follow the developments. The news at 10 is up next. Good night for now.